Ben Platt is the multi-talented star of Netflix's The Politician. I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Ben. And to start things off, let's just go back to the beginning. Did you have any sort of feelings about the works of Ryan Murphy before he asked you to come on board?
Certainly, I think growing up as a queer teenager and Glee coming out right when I was in high school, that had a really intense kind of effect on the way that I perceive queer characters in media. And I loved, Kurt's storyline, and I loved the whole world of Glee. Being a musical theater nerd myself, having something be so mainstream that was in that kind of world, in that box, was kind of a new experience for me. And I found his television to be consistently really it really made you want to watch the next episode. It always was very kind of delicious, kind of soapy in the right way. And so, yeah, I certainly was a big fan. American Horror Story is like the only horror film adjacent thing I'm brave enough to watch. So I also love that. And yeah, so I was certainly predisposed to want to work with him in some capacity, but I certainly couldn't have predicted it would be something like The Politician.
Yeah, and there is a very heightened and specific tone to this show where it is quite over the top and soapy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you did you have to really work on nailing the specific tone within the individual scenes as far as line delivery and the little individual choices you made as an actor?
Totally. I think what I really loved about it as a theater person coming into this world of Politician is that the language is so dense, and like you said, it's very kind of heightened and specific, and so it felt like the type of material that I was familiar with. As much as I love doing something entirely instinctual and naturalistic, it is really a fun challenge to play somebody that is somewhat larger than life and try to make them feel grounded in reality, like they have their feet on the floor. And especially somebody who is as sort of outwardly unlikable as Payton, which is also something I really am a fan of, sort of that type of challenge, and making someone understandable and relatable that is doing things that are filled with hubris and moral ambiguity. But certainly, I think it was kind of a learning curve in terms of getting used to the way Payton's cadence was, and sort of the way that he relates with other people, and making sure that, no matter how sort of large he became or how quippy, sharp, sort of otherworldly, he always remained a knowable person, human being. But yeah, that's the language that Brad and Ian and Ryan write is it's really delicious for an actor, because there's so much to play, and there's if anything, it requires reining in rather than pulling out, which is always an easier kind of edit to make. But yeah.
Mhm. And what I find so interesting about Peyton, just as a main character of a show, is that he is ambitious and he wants this one thing, which is to hold power and to one day be the president of the United States. But he's also very unsure of who he really is beyond that, kind of on a
Mhm.
deeper level. So do you have a clear picture in your mind of who Peyton is when you strip away the elections and this drive for power that he has?
Yes and no. I think that I try not to ever get ahead of where we've seen him. I think that, because the concept of the show is this sort of triptych kind of, first season is really getting to see the background of where he was born and where how this all came to be. And then the second season is this sort of somewhat of a development of that, and becoming somewhat of an adult and kind of maturing in a certain sense. I don't kind of want to play the finish line before I know really what the finish line is, since I, obviously have my guesses about where things might go, but I don't necessarily know what he'll grow into. But at the end of the day, I do think I know obviously what Peyton's insides look like. I don't know that I could play him if I didn't. I think he is really on a quest to be significant and to prove that he is worthy of, making some sort of mark on the world. I think particularly growing up in this very white and privileged surroundings that we get to see in the first season, kind of skewered and satirized, he feels a bit lost and a bit sort of acquired by that community rather than born into it, since he's adopted by Gwyneth and Bob Balaban. And I think there's this deep-seated desire and need to prove that he is consequential, and I think that is kind of met at a beautiful kind of dangerous apex with all of this innate hubris and confidence and arrogance that he just has also rather inherently. And I think when those things combine, on the one hand, he gets a lot done and he can make a lot of positive change if that's what he's looking to do. But at the same time, obviously, his intentions at the end of the day are always to forward himself. And so I think the really fascinating kind of conversation that that character in particular brings up is this question of authenticity, and if the means to the end are the same, and if the things being accomplished are beneficial and benevolent and good for the greater community, does it really matter that the reason he wants to accomplish them is only to forward his own political career? And I don't think anyone has really a finite answer to that, and I think that's what makes playing Payton so fun and juicy and makes each day different, is that there are days where he gets to lean into his humanity entirely and into his empathy and things like that, but there are also days where he really has to challenge that, all the while doing something that theoretically is a really positive change, hopefully, for his constituents, if you will.
Well, there's also just so much that happens with Peyton, even over the course of that first season. How much did you actually know ahead of time about just the arc of the series and all of the wild twists along the way?
I knew broad strokes. Brad and Ian and Ryan really like the element of surprise in terms of when scripts are coming out and when we as actors are finding things out. The excitement of that and sort of the unknown of that, I think, really contributes to how spontaneous and exciting it feels when we do get to actually perform it on the day. But certainly in terms of how the election was going to turn out and what his romantic kind of arc would be and what his relationship with his mother, played by Gwyneth, would be, all of those kind of big lines that follow through the whole season, I was very much aware of, thankfully, as a producer from the beginning, so that I kind of could wrap my head around where we were going to end, so I knew how to behave as we started. But in terms of little plot twists and lines, and when is Infinity going to find out that she's not really ill, and what's going to happen with Jessica Lange's character, and how do Bette and Judith become introduced, and those things I got to experience with my fellow actors as we read the scripts as they came in, which is just makes it a more exciting and thrilling experience, especially when you have the safety net of knowing, on a foundational level, who is this character and where is he headed. Then the twists and turns can feel immediate.
You also get to sing a bit on the show. You sing River, you sing Vienna. I don't know exactly what the chronology was as far as you getting attached and the writing of the scripts, but was that something that was always there just as this added layer for Peyton?
Yeah, certainly. When I first had a meal with Ryan to discuss making the show, long before we began, it was a part of the initial pitch to me that Ryan made, and he was very clear from the get-go, which I then reinforced obviously with my own insecurities and fears, that we not allow the singing and the musical elements to be sort of wedged in and to be sort of a distraction or to be counterintuitive to either Peyton's story or understanding Peyton, and that they had to be a value add. And so we've really made sure that they are few and far between. And as much as I love singing, and I'm so happy that that's become part of the culture of the show, and that we were able to share the songs, on streaming and things like that after the fact. Obviously, what's most important to me as the actor playing this character and also as a producer of the show is that the narrative comes through, and the point of the story and sort of the satire and the comedy and the sharpness comes through. And I never want the music to undercut that, only to give you an opportunity to kind of see inside Peyton in a way that you wouldn't otherwise, and to allow him to kind of show a little bit of his soul, a little bit of his empathy that he doesn't really show when he's in this kind of stoic politician mode. And I think we've done a really good job of that, particularly as time has gone on. We had those 3 musical moments in the first season, and now in our second season, there's only 1. And I think, the more kind of sparse they are, the more meaning they carry. But certainly from the very beginning, Ryan, who's no dummy, always wanted to include some musical element in the audience's relationship with Peyton.
And you also mentioned this earlier, but you've gotten to work with so many great actors over these 2 seasons. I mean, Jessica Lange, Gwyneth Paltrow, Judith Light, Bette Midler. I mean, and some of the younger actors too, like Zoe Deutsch and Lucy Boynton, David Corenswet. I mean, what was the set experience like with this group of actors and working with this kind of theatrical almost material?
It was pretty extraordinary. I as a producer, when working with people who are titans like Ryan and Brad, and people who've been doing this for a long time and know a lot more about the ins and outs than I do, I was really eager to find the ways in which I could be a value add in terms of that title. Ryan really wanted me to feel some sort of creative ownership, and while I do appreciate that as a concept, I also wanted to prove useful in that role. And I think that the thing I really found fell in my lap in a way that I really appreciated was kind of cultivating this community, particularly between the young cast members, because I do, again, come from the theater world where so much of what makes an experience beautiful is that family quality and that familial bond. And so as soon as we had, cast all of the, Ronnie Jones and Theo Germain and Laura Dreyfus and Zoe Deutsch and Lucy Boynton and David Cornsweet and Ryan Haddad and Benjamin Barrett. And, as soon as we had all these extraordinary young actors from all these different walks of life, I tried to make as many opportunities for us as possible to bond as a group and to, have activities together and get to know each other and feel like part of one community, because the show has so many different plots that kind of skew off from Payton. And so it's very rare, particularly in the first season, that we had the opportunity to all work together. So I really wanted to make sure that we felt like we were all making something in tandem, and so that everybody was going to bring forward their best work because they felt very personally invested. And also, I've just loved getting to know all of those really talented, extraordinary people. And on the other side, you have these legends like, Gwyneth Paltrow, Judith Light, Bette Midler, who it's just, Jessica Lange, who it's mostly just a privilege to get to watch. And it also forces you to rise to the occasion. If you're doing a scene like, the end of the pilot of season 1, where I'm having to sort of really break down entirely emotionally with Jessica and Zoe. And again, coming from the theater, doing that out of context and doing that sort of dropping into a moment that is that emotionally intense without the kind of build up as an actor is still a fairly new experience for me. And so to have the motivation of Jessica Lange sitting here giving a fully realized kind of human performance was an incredible fire under my butt to really arrive at that place and kind of give of myself. And then second season, you have Bette Midler just giving an insanely hilarious comedic performance, which we haven't gotten to see in a minute. And she's just brilliant. And so to watch her was a privilege, and it was just mostly a battle not to ruin her takes by laughing.
Yeah. And being part of a show like this, does it actually make you think about just the whole system we have in place here in America and just what really goes on behind the scenes, at least politically and campaigning and stuff like that?
Yes and no. I think that there are certain things about the specifics of the story and sort of the way that it's portrayed that allow it to feel a bit like an escape and not too kind of forcing a mirror on people, which I think, given all of the much larger issues and more pressing issues that are happening right now, I think it's nice that it's not necessarily trying to comment so heavily. But I do think, of course, there are concepts within it that do make me kind of think a bit more about certainly what type of person wants to become a politician and what the motivations to do that might be, and when those motivations come into play and when they don't really matter, and what, how does that compare to the action that's really being taken. And then, of course, I think particularly with the second season, obviously the first season as well, given that everyone's in high school, but the way that the second season, progresses, and the importance of activating youth in terms of their involvement in politics and their willingness to show up and vote and make themselves heard, is definitely an important part of the show. And I think that is very much what we are in need of right now. So again, and there's also an episode about cancel culture, which is obviously becoming a very kind of rampant phenomenon as well. So there are certainly pockets of things that kind of force us to take a look at ourselves. But what I really relished in the show is being able to kind of examine those things and present those things in a way that didn't feel at all like a lecture or like a kind of microscope, and just felt entertaining and funny and biting, and have them be sort of the backdrop for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've been very busy even outside of The Politician. You also had a concert special come out on Netflix live from Radio City Music Hall, which was for your first album. How did that all come about for you?
Sure. So I did my first tour last spring with my first album, Sing to Me Instead, and played some houses at the Dolby Theater and the Beacon Theater and 9 or 10 other houses around the U.S. And I fell so deeply in love with the experience of performing as myself. I think it's something that I have been kind of working towards as a theater actor since I was very, very young. And it was my first experience kind of living to that full potential in terms of no character, and a show that I had entirely creatively kind of envisioned along with my designers and directors. And I think when we saw the way the audience was reacting to the show, we really felt like it was a special enough group of songs and a special enough narrative and visual production that I really wanted to immortalize it. And I think it really coincided beautifully with the Politician experience and with the relationship that I had sort of forged with Netflix through Ryan at that stage. And it seemed like a really great time to kind of broach that with them, particularly with a venue so iconic as Radio City on the horizon. And so it kind of was a beautiful mix of everybody was in the right place at the right time, and they really were open to, creating this evening that felt like you were there with me at Radio City. And really, much as they had with Ryan's creative vision, they were just incredibly open to allowing my creative vision to remain exactly as it was, and they weren't looking to sort of encroach on it in any way. They just wanted to preserve it and show it as it really was. And I think we didn't really preempt the fact that it would be so necessary for it to feel so live and so immediate, given the pandemic and given the fact that nobody can really have that experience for quite some time now. And I think it was this weird kind of universe intervention thing where now you do get to watch and feel that you are in the crowd and in that room in Radio City, and there's, you know, all of the sweat and the imperfections are there, and that's something I really wanted. And so I while I, you know, obviously wish it wasn't well timed and I wish that none of this was happening, it was very nice that it ended up being kind of a faux live experience for people. I'm very proud of it for sure.
Yeah. Well, here at Gold Derby, we love awards, and you are no stranger to awards. I mean, let's talk about it. You won the Tony for Dear Evan Hansen and a Grammy for the cast album and an Emmy for a performance you did of You Will Be Found on the Today Show. What has it meant for you to get all that recognition, and specifically for this to be for one project?
You know, it's a lot of, first of all, I mean, it's a blessing. It's heartening and it's humbling, and you know, it was a wild experience, and it's opened so many doors for me to be able to do creatively what I've always wanted to do. So first and foremost, I think that's a wonderful thing. You know, at the same time, it creates a lot of pressure and it creates a lot of expectation, and particularly since it's all for one character, it sort of makes that a difficult sort of bridge to come out from under in terms of trying to forge new paths for myself, which I've been fortunate enough to be able to do with Ryan and with the show and with my own music and with Radio City and all of that. But, you know, it does kind of, it props up that particular role onto this mantle, which of course, you know, I owe a lot of what's happened now to Dear Evan Hansen. But yeah, just again, kind of puts a fire under my butt to show what I can do beyond that. And you know, I'm in no rush to necessarily, you know, fill out that acronym too quickly. You know, I'd like to stay around and have a career for as long as I can and keep doing what I love. And so there's no rush, I think, moving forward. But it's wonderful.
Well, speaking of that a little bit, you are expected to reprise the role in the movie adaptation, from what I hear. Who knows? I don't know if it's been fully confirmed yet. And yeah, you might just go on and win an Oscar for it. Just go full EGOT for one character. Why not? It's actually interesting because Cynthia Erivo is actually in the same boat. If she were to reprise her role in The Color Purple for that adaptation, weird situation. But yeah, is there anything that you could just tell us about how that movie adaptation is developing?
Sure. You know, we're in very much the same boat as a lot of people right now in terms of trying to suss out what's possible during COVID and what's not. It's been very much in development, and the hope was very much to make it this year. And you know, I am I'm not blind to the fact that I'm a 27-year-old man and I'm not an 18-year-old. And you know, I'm hoping that if this does come together, you know, obviously I'll get rid of the stash. But I think, given the specific situation with this character that I've created and my sort of attachment to this piece and the willingness of, you know, the studio to make the film, given my involvement, I would hope we could maybe see beyond that particular, you know, obstacle. But the greater obstacle at the moment, of course, is just, can we practically make a film in this time the way that we want to, and have all of the necessary scenes and images in a safe way? And if we can't, we can't. But, you know, here's hoping.
I'll take it. Well, for those of you watching now, hit like and subscribe for more Emmy season interviews like this, and head to goldderby.com to start making your Emmy predictions. Platt, such a pleasure getting to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thanks, man.